This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing stated on it, either by its hosts or any guests, is to be construed as psychological, medical, or legal advice. You are listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. I'm Haley Radke. Today's guest is the remarkable Dr. Alice Diver, law professor and outspoken adoptee advocate. Alice has written multiple journal articles and books on the topic of adoptee rights, including her latest, Genetic Stigma in Law and Literature, Orphanhood, Adoption, and the Right to Reunion. Alice shared some of her personal story with us, and then we dive into her work, including Language and Adoption, where you'll hear such gems as surplus people and substitute families. We also get to talk about how adoptees are viewed by the law in comparison with adoptive parents. We wrap up with some recommended resources, and as always, links to everything we'll be talking about today are on the website, adopteeson.com. Before we get started, I have a little update for you. If you're a regular listener, you'll know I've taken the last few summers off. But since dropping to 2 episodes a month, we're going to be going through the summer. So please keep subscribed or following wherever you listen to podcasts, as you'll have several opportunities to hear from fellow adoptees this summer. Of course, we have lots of content going for Patreon supporters as well, and info for that is always available on the website, adopteeson.com. Okay, let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome to the podcast, Dr. Alice Diver. Welcome, Alice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
You don't know this, but I've admired your work for years and years and years. So this is like a career highlight for me, truly. So I'm very excited to get to talk to you. And I'd love it if you would share a little of your story with us.
Wow, thank you so much for that. That's amazing to me. Thank you. Well, I guess I'm an adoptee. Obviously, I think anyone that knows me knows that, because I tend to tell them quite early on. So I was one of the 1960s vintage babies. I was adopted in Montreal. I was 7 months, so I went through I would say mother-baby home institutions rather than homes. So in through a mother-baby orphanage, sort of the Catholic Welfare Bureau. And my folks, their story was quite sad. They'd been married for 20 years and had a baby, but he passed away after only a few days. So they got me very shortly after that. And they said they wanted a girl so as not to be reminded that they'd had a wee boy. And they were sort of mid-40s. So they were, I guess, lucky to have a child at that age, because we were coming into the era of older persons maybe not being ideal adopters. They were very good, and they did their best. They took us we moved to, it was just me, only child as well, or as I'd say, rescue dog. From time to time, I would describe myself, sort of hard. I don't think they knew what hit them. They'd had cats before, but they'd never had, this deranged creature who yelled a lot that came into their lives. And because my mum because she was Irish, she was always very homesick. So in 1979, when I was 12, we went from Montreal to a small town in Northern Ireland where there was no McDonald's, no Pop-Tarts. I thought I'd died and gone to hell. Very, very upsetting experience to me, and had lots of fair-haired, very Irish-looking cousins. And then I sort of stood out as being different, but adoption was never really discussed. I think they hadn't told some people, that because they'd been having a baby and then they got me. So some of the family didn't know. But it soon became apparent. It was in the days of matching characteristics. So they were very fair, and they were given this blue-eyed blonde baby. Then at the age of about 18 months, the blue eyes, blonde hair disappeared, unfortunately. And they ended up with this very brown-eyed, swarthy, round baby that bore no resemblance. But I guess in what has shaped me in terms of the search, the way Quebec works, it's closed records, as I think is the same for a lot of US states. So when I was 18, I applied for the non-identifying information. So they send you very helpful non-identifying things like you had big eyes and a nice shaped head, and you like to sit outside in the sun. And I thought all of those things still apply. Thank you. Didn't narrow it down. I did discover, though, the thing that made it was I discovered Indigenous heritage. So I didn't know where. I heard Newfoundland, and then I was able to do some research of my own. But that was amazing. So no one had any clue about that. I guess it ties in with not exactly baby scoop, but with maybe the stigma or the need to deny people's ancestry. No medical records, so I didn't know that most of my birth family were deaf or going deaf with autosclerosis. That would have been useful to know. Although, hearing aids are great. Switch them off at night. It's all good. I'll tell you a little bit just about the reunion, because that's a lot of people they seem to like this bit of the story. So the way it works in Quebec, you write through social services, intermediary person. It's all confidential. I wrote a very lovely letter saying that I was a great person. And at that stage, I was married, had my daughter, and sent a photograph of her. And I thought, well, this will just be the hallmark reunion, and I'll be welcomed with open arms, because what's not to love? But after about a year, birth mother came out. I know the term's not great, but she's okay with it. But I'll say mother. Mother came back, and all confidential, anonymous. And she said, no, sorry, I'm not telling anyone about you. I have teenagers at this point. She said, so no, there will be no contact. Fine. I sort of thought, well, there's not much I can do about that. I just have to accept it. And then she wrote a second letter after that, which was sort of more of the same. And I thought, well, she's clearly struggling. And I guess it was a burden to carry. Yeah. So you try to put that aside for as long as you can, and you get on with things. Then I had 4 children of my own, and I worked. Then DNA sort of came into the public realm. So in 2012, I thought I might just get the DNA done and see who pops up. And it found some sort of 4th cousins. They were very nice, very welcoming, but I couldn't connect any dots. Until about 6 years ago, I found an aunt who was younger than me and had been doing her DNA to see about tracing more of the Indigenous ancestry. So within half an hour, the way it works, we both got an email. Within half an hour, armed with a surname, I found an obituary. I went on Facebook, and I was able to see pictures of my half-siblings who all, so my poor husband, this was about 3 a.m. I just elbowed him and said, you got to wake up. And I said, look at these people. Do they look like me? And he was just, I can't really say the expletives that he said, but he was instantly, correct response, wide awake, going, my God, and I was 50 at that stage. He said, oh, yeah, he says, I think we found your people. He said, because your people look like our kids. He said, you just look at them. He said, yeah, he says, that has to be your mother. But just, you're the same person. So my poor aunt, she then tried to make contact, because I said, listen, this lady does not want contact, so don't frighten her, please, because I don't want to be responsible for someone having a heart attack. I said, tread softly. I said, I've made my peace. If you can convince her, that's fine. And of course, it was Christmas. It was my birthday. I ate my birthday, the first week of January, worst week of the year. So it just sort of, I sat, and it was took about 6 weeks of my aunt and some of her sisters convincing her that I was not, an axe murderer, and that it was okay, and that I didn't want anything apart from maybe to say hello and maybe the odd email. And ironically, the thing that convinced her that I meant no harm was she was so scared of being discovered because she hadn't said to her kids. I said, if it's the DNA thing that's scaring you, in case, people start to see matches, I said, I'll take it down. I'll set it to private so you don't have to be panicking. And that seemed to flip the switch. And she said, well, that's a nice thing to do. And then I will never forget it. I was for work. I was down in Cardiff in Wales. And as you do, there's this sort of abandoned castle. It's hard to beat a good castle. So I thought, I will walk a rare sunny day. I thought, I'm just going to go for a walk. And the tour guide was busy telling us about, and I won't even try a Welsh accent, but was busy telling us about, who was hung and who died and what ghosts there were, when a message pops up on Facebook going, hey, it's your mother. It's been, whatever it is, 50 years. I think it's time I said hello and we can chat. And I thought, I have to now hold it together and walk around a castle. I have to, how do I manage this? So, and I can remember texted, my 2 youngest daughters were out for dinner in a restaurant, just having pizza. They live the high life. I don't. I texted them the message, and one daughter burst into tears, loud tears, in the middle of the restaurant, while the other girl was like, "Could you stop that? It looks like we're breaking up." Pull yourself together. And then she said a week later, she was telling her friends, and they all started to cry. And she says, "I can't handle this. Could people stop crying? What is wrong with everyone?" But no, it was nice. So, and after that, and in her defense now, she's never, my mom has not missed a day since then. Both morning and night, I get a little Facebook message saying, what the weather is, what the menu for the day is. Lovely, normal, everyday things.
For 6 years?
She's not missed a day and night. She hasn't missed. If I miss a day, I'll get a message saying, "Where are you living?" And I'm like, "Yes," which is nice to get that bit of maternal, concern or whatever. And initially she said she was going to take a few months to very slowly tell her children about me, because it is quite a bombshell. But within a week she had told them. And a couple of days later, then my eldest brother was messaging me, and we talked for about 2 hours about Doctor Who. So it's little funny things that, and I've been sent recipes. I've been over to visit. I've gone to Montreal. They came to Ireland, went to Newfoundland and saw moose, and and I have to say, it's been very good. It's been very good. It can't be easy for people to have this random stranger turns up, I didn't turn up on a doorstep as such, but yeah, so it was, never thought that would have happened. And yeah, it's been going pretty good.
Amazing.
That's my story. Longer than I meant it to be.
No, I love it. I love it. You're a law professor. From what I understand, you mostly teach family law. And what drew you to become an attorney? And you've been researching adoption for many years prior to your reunion.
Yeah, I suppose even as an undergraduate student, we had the chance to do a research paper in final year. So I used mine as a rant against the system, really, to just look at adoption orders, how they close records, freeing orders. Even now, I would look sometimes at cases where contact is denied between older siblings, and sometimes for very good reasons it may have to be. But it's just interesting that the language is still of the 1970s. Sometimes I find it's interesting, some of the reasons that they cite. So yeah, it's just always been an interest. When I was a lawyer, I was only practicing for about 5 years before I went into academia. So I probably did more property law, some child protection cases, trying to defend a care order or trying to have contact between parents and children. But sometimes that can cut a bit close. There's times you think, this is one that's going to follow me home. Academia is much better. You get paid for having coffee and talking to people and annoying my poor students. It's much more satisfactory in terms of a career choice. No disrespect to my former fellow lawyers. But yeah, and family laws, and I say it's a nice one to teach, although we do a segment on domestic abuse, which is harrowing. I always say to people now, there's a trigger warning. I find increasingly more over the last 30 years, more care experienced people coming through that would have been known as care leavers here, but now care experienced. And I know when I'm addressing a room, I'll say, "I know there's adopted people out there. I won't make you put your hands up if you wish to talk," because you can kill a conversation stone dead by going, "Who? Anybody adopted?" It's not yet acceptable to do that. Maybe someday, but generally, somebody, one or two people will come up maybe after a week or so and say, I was adopted. Or the thing about the UK, records are open, so you can get your birth certificate at 18. Don't necessarily get maybe all the supports to go with that. It's getting better, but there's still some issues. There's still the belief, I guess, that I'm not thinking of Ireland, where records were recently opened and maybe not going that well, and their redress scheme. But there's a sort of a thought that, well, you get that piece of paper, now you've got a name, or, now you can identify your people. Away you go. And they assume it'll be the hallmark happy ending. And it isn't always. They forget that people can be rejected, that there's stigma, that reunions can break down, that they can just wither quietly sometimes, where people go, yay, and then it's like, okay, novelty wears off. So I would love to see more research being done into that. if possible. I know it's a funny one. But
do you think if you hadn't had your original rejection from your birth mother, that you would have dove so deeply into critical adoption scholarship?
Wow, that's a really good question, which I've never really thought about. Possibly, yes, because I'm quite bad-tempered and grumpy. So I possibly would have, I probably would have, I'm very good at seeing the negative in any situation. Would I have, I probably might not have been just as angry about the system and about everything. But yeah, I definitely would have seen, because I would have seen others struggling with the brick wall and the closed records. So I think I probably would have, because I suppose the thing about reunion is if you manage to get one, and even if it goes well, you can be happy, but there's still the voice at the back saying, I really get along with these people. They're lovely and I can see I'm going to be fond of them. But I lost 50 years. So for example, like my sister, we, unbeknownst to ourselves, we have a daughter only a week apart back in the 90s. So if we had been, in touch then, how amazing would that have been, that we would have been pregnant at the same time, and just all the little things that you missed. And I've said to my brothers, it would have been just so, well, an only child. I know you're maybe going to be a bit odd, but I've frequently told them, I says, if I'd had you guys growing up, even though they're younger than me, but they're a lot bigger. And it just would have been nice. You wanted someone to fight your corner. I just would love to going back to have been able to say, I'll get my brothers. Feel like it, like Daenerys Targaryen, here's my dragons. That's what it would have been like, because they're quite, they're big fellas, and I think they would. I like to think they would have protected their short, grumpy sister, maybe. So,
we have quite a bit in common. I'm also Canadian. I don't know if you knew that. And I had a rejection from my birth mother, but we've never been in contact since our brief reunion. And I started the show a couple years into reunion with my father. And I don't know, had all the things gone right, if this is where I would be. I'm not sure. So, I'm thinking about that too. I also was raised an only and have siblings now. So it's a real shift, isn't it? From being an only solo focus to being a sister.
It's nice. I like it. I do like it. Although I have to because I'm sort of would be the oldest, I have to rein in the urge, to dispense advice or to try and, maybe be bossy and stuff. I have to, so it's unusual to have, it's lovely, but unusual to have siblings. So I never know if it's said too much.
How do you rein in that urge? Then maybe that's a conversation for another time, but I could use some advice on that.
Not badly. I've not managed to do it very badly, as my kids could probably advise as well. They could sort of say, yeah, mother has started again. She's off again with the advice that we don't want. So,
well, I'm curious if you, let's shift to more sort of work focus. Have you done much looking into adoption annulment or rescission or any of those kinds of things? I saw your presentation at ASAC, and another lawyer was presenting, Greg Luce, and I don't know if you saw his presentation. Yes, you did. And so when you were initially sharing your story, and I've heard you share it a few other places, you said your coloring changed. So you went from fair to a little darker, and you also found out later that you're deaf. And I thought, oh, your adoptive parents actually had recourse to return you if they had cared to do so. I don't know if folks know much about that, but I'm wondering your thoughts on that and flipping it over to the adoptee rights side of things. We have no such recourse, really.
Exactly. But I found out after my mother had passed away, my dad sort of let slip one day that apparently when I was about 2, he said, yeah, I think she wanted to send you back at that stage, but I said no. And I'm like, okay, well, that's an interesting thing.
No!
Yes. And then, but I thought, maybe that just came out of somewhere, or, I think he meant well. He meant well to say it. And, again, I was a handful and she was grieving, and Yeah, so I know it's a threat too, that sometimes adoptive parents will say in jest to their children. I know so many people that was said to. And even if they weren't serious, that's not the thing. Do not say that.
Never.
To an adoptee, because we're always, yourself, I think we're always looking for any potential signs of rejection. So if someone, maybe stops speaking or is angry at you, you immediately assume, that I'm gone. They've written me out of their life. So it's a funny one. I think, I suppose that whenever the deafness was discovered, funny enough, I was about 27, and I remember telling my mom, I'm going to get adoptive mom. I said, I'm going to get hearing aids. This is great. And she said, we were told there was nothing wrong with you. And she was quite cross. And I was all, well, there's loads wrong. Behold, there are many flaws. Again, I think she meant it well, but it didn't come out that way, and yet it just reminds you that you're a bit of a commodity. Sometimes you're filling a role, which is a dark way to see things, I know, but that's how we see it sometimes, because that's...
Facts are facts, frankly.
They are 100%. Yeah, they absolutely are. Yeah, it's funny, the thing about rescinding one's adoption, the UK doesn't allow you to do that. And I had, funny enough, a symposium last year, and I had Scottish and English adoptees coming in by Zoom, and we had a really great heated discussion. A Northern Ireland judge was in for that one. So I went out and got coffee and left them to it. It was very, very lively. I should try and find the recording. They were saying, why do we not have the right to appeal our adoption, to take back our original name? If an adoptive placement, especially if it's abusive, why can't we reclaim our identities like this? And I remember the judge, he's a lovely man, and he said, no, I agree. He said, the law is flawed. That's something that really needs to be looked at. And even with, I suppose, the notion of redress and recompense is really what's all about at the moment. We're hoping that the UK will apologise to adoptees. They haven't yet. We're still waiting. How it wasn't their fault, the ill treatment, I'll never know. But
nor has Canada. There was the Senate hearings and those things, but nothing really came of that to this point. Mm-hmm.
But even when you do sort of get the apology, is it a piece of paper? Is it a word? Does it open the door to you maybe getting compensation? I know Northern Ireland at the minute is the ongoing investigations. How do you compensate someone for a life that wasn't lived, or the relationships that you didn't have, or a placement that wasn't ideal? There's just some things there that little bit too horrific or beyond the pale that they're a tough one. And yeah, law is, so I guess I'm back on my soapbox, but law is quite inadequate at trying to, unless I had a time machine. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. Maybe that's why we talked about Doctor Who, me and the brother, maybe because, a TARDIS would have been good, because I think we had some discussions about, in childhood, would we have gotten along, and, things that we could have, they were appalled to hear that as an only child, if you're playing a game of, I won't say chess, I wasn't great at chess, but checkers, Battleship, Cluedo, games that you normally would have one other person, you'd have to go away and come back to forget your last move to work out a way to play a board game by yourself. You'd see why my parents wanted to return me, actually. I was a creepy kid. Creepy kid with many personalities. But yeah, no, it's a strange one. The law, I think, is gradually waking up as adoptees get older and as countries start to ban international adoption. Mm-hmm. And surrogacy has come into the mix as well, with people saying that we're complex and these issues are tricky and difficult, and there isn't a fix for them. Yeah, so at least there's a bit of growing awareness, not as much as there should be. I would like society to take better notice of us and not use us as punchlines. That's the bit that really, gets my goat. You don't have to go more than a few days before you'll something on social media. Someone will be making a joke where the punchline is, "Hey, you're adopted," and it just makes me rather cross.
Mm-hmm. I've heard you say this before, that the law is sort of flawed and is not in any place to fix these wrongs right now for us. And in your new book, you talk so much about adoption in literature in various forms. And I've also heard you express this idea that fiction like helps move culture forward. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I don't want to speak for you. So can you expand on that? And then like what kinds of books and representation, like we're seeing more and more adoptee authored work in the world, which is wonderful. That's getting accolades and hitting bestseller lists and stuff, which is amazing. And we're celebrating those adoptees. What more things do you want to see in the world that you think could shift the law?
Right. The memoirs are doing great work. I think it's so important that people that they're like testimony, they're like evidence, a long form of it where people are saying, okay, I know the narrative is that adoption is a thing of wonder and it's very beautiful and it can be a good thing. However, there needs to be a light shone. Talk to the adult adoptee and get them to talk about their childhood, because people, unless you've been there or walked in the shoes, you don't really get, I don't want to say the kept, because it sounds sort of mean, but it's not a bad term either. It does sum up.
That's what I say.
I'm sorry. There is kept privilege. There is. They just don't always get it.
Another adoptee therapist of ours, Pam Cordano, calls them muggles.
Yeah, perfect. That is civilians. Yeah, muggles is good because their world was very different to ours. You know, from, you could say from birth, from pre-birth, you know, they didn't have to track people down, things that they take for granted, knowing who you look like, having someone that you look like, and not having that. I think we do the eggshell walk quite a lot. I think we're often so scared about saying things to not drive people away, or maybe sometimes we drive them away first. I don't know. There's just a lot of little differences there. It's funny, you know, when if you're in a support group, if you're in a room of adoptees, even if you're not the same age, you could tell a story and the heads will start nodding and people will be like, yeah, I get that. Let me tell you this sort of one of mine. And it's like being in a warm bath. You wouldn't be in a warm bath with people, you know what I mean? But that's emotionally, it's sort of, you know, not literally, but yeah, it's just, you're among kindred spirits. I like that, the muggles. I do like that. Yeah. They don't have our magic powers to read people in an instant or to cope with things that other people would find. Sometimes you'll say something about your childhood and you watch people's jaws drop and you sort of think, oh, sorry, I forgot you were in a little different universe and that wouldn't have been a thing for you. It's quite nice to appall them though. I do like because then we lose our filter and it's, you know, I just think it's an appropriate response for them to say that was wrong. I think, yeah, do you think? Yes, it was. And then the conversation can move on. But, you know, I think we just need to keep them educated. Fight the good fight. That's what I think. What I think we're doing. You were saying about, yeah, law just doesn't quite do it. Even in other areas, it doesn't always promote justice, as we know. Literature, I think. The memoirs, definitely. They're fantastic. Sometimes pop culture can do a thing, can reach the parts, I guess, that law doesn't. I probably said it at the ASAC talk. I mean, the movie Philomena, not without its problems, but it brought quite the message. You know, it definitely brought it home to people. Here's a thing that happened, a thing that was very wrong. It's pity the adoptee had passed away because it would have been good to have had his story and a bit more about that. The book, I suppose as well, I've gone through just various eras to see how adoptees are treated. They're not always adoptees. Sometimes they're foundlings. Sometimes they've been rejected. So there's a lot of folklore in there. And I was amazed to see how some of the odd little things in folklore that have survived. So burial, where were the unbaptized babies buried in Ireland? Was it unconsecrated ground? Was it a septic tank? What traditions went with that? Did you even get a burial? Like a proper, dignified, humanizing, you know, ceremony to happen? Why is there this fear of us? Because there is the fear of the unknown stranger turns up and goes, I'm your sister. Brace yourself. Like, some people are okay with that. Others are like, what do you want? Do you want money? Please don't hurt me. And quite often if there's a psychopath in a Netflix tale, I think that they're either adopted or they've got some missing thing. They're not identifying a parent. It's a little bit tired. I'll still watch it and then I'll complain loudly to whoever's in the room with me, even if it's only myself, because we got so used to that. What else does the book have? The book's, I was told recently that it was quirky and a bit of a mashup. And I said, well, maybe that's what I was aiming for. It has a bit of everything. So where else would you get? We've got Heathcliff, we've got the Dickens orphans, sort of getting along together. Jane Eyre, because she had her witchcraft. That's the hill I will die on. And then I suppose going into the happy 20th century where you've got your Anne of Green Gables, which so many people love. And I feel so bad for raining on their parade by saying, yeah, but okay, she was an orphan, but she was the poster girl for a very bad system of transportation and the farm children. But even in the book, they're like, yeah, we're fresh out of boys. You'll have to take a girl. Just lots of little things that are there. But it's good for us to read about it because on the second reading, you start to see the little bits that don't add up. And the gratitude, her main thing is gratitude. So that's in there.
Can we talk about The Giver?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because, so that's by Lois Lowry. I looked it up today. It was published in 93 and it won the Newbery in 94. And that's when I read it. And I was 11. And I recently gave it to my son to read. And he's 11 when we're recording this. And he's like, oh, it was kind of depressing. And I was like, Anyway, I loved that book. I loved Anne of Green Gables. I had many books that deeply permeated my childhood. And you said you were playing games by yourself and turning the chessboard. I was reading by myself in my room, the same books over and over, including The Giver. And when you talked about The Giver in your presentation, I was like, oh, my son had just read that. So I got my literal childhood copy. And I was like, I gotta reread that because some of the points you made, I was like, what? I don't remember that. So reading it with my adult eyes, I was like, oh my word. All of society is adoptees. Birth mother is a job you get assigned. And it's this low level, no glory, servitude sort of situation. And I was like, oh my goodness, all the bombshells I had from that. Thank you for reawakening that for me.
It's a great book. I suppose we home in, if there's an adoption, not even a subplot, but just the elements of it. So they had to, yeah, everyone was adopted because obviously they took tablets that they wouldn't have the stirrings and the feelings, and there was no romance, there was no no music, no color, none of these things. And the term birth mother, it was built up to be, this is an honorable profession, but then you very quickly see that they're just discarded. 3 births, that's it. We see an older lady later on who had been one, but she never got a family of her own. And it's just they're very derided and so on. I don't know if you've read the sequel. There's 3 sequels. Son is the final book. That's the one maybe to go to for a little bit of closure. I don't want to give spoilers, but it takes you back and gives you more of an insight into what was happening to the girls that were producing the product, is how they refer to the babies. I think if I could, in some senses, it's perfect. It's bleak, but it shows you the dark side. What would happen if family life was totally changed and there were no laws protecting it? And I think, well, that's exactly what does happen for some adoptees. Goodbye family life, and we'll just get on with it. I would warn mothers reading it if they'd gone through a system like that. It made me think of a lot of the Irish testimony, the English testimony, the brutality, the ill treatment as the product was taken away and given to another family. Again, lots of drugs, either to dry up the milk or to suppress the emotions and so on. And then you remember, this is a book for kids. It's for teenagers. But then I think, well, you know what? Maybe it's, it's good that they read of such things, and then they'll think, well, this is fiction. And then we can do a Margaret Atwood and say, oh, no, it is not. It's happening somewhere, sometime. Yeah. And it's sometimes you need to sort of shine a light on things that aren't right, because how else are you going to change them? Even if it upsets people, if no one ever got upset, nothing would ever change. And we'd be like the happy people in The Giver that don't know that apples are red and that never have music. But they don't have grandparents. They don't have Christmas lights. They don't have, any of these things. So it's, I think it's a good work.
One of the terms you use in your book repeatedly is surplus child.
Yes.
Can you talk about that? Because that lit something in me. I was like, oh my God, I'm a surplus.
Sorry. I apologize, but never going to light people on fire. I apologize for that. I know it was a term used in, I can't remember which, I'm fairly certain it was used in one of the novels, might have been Handmaid's Tale. Somebody used the phrase. So of course, I jumped on it and thought, oh, that's bleak. I'll use that. But why not? If it's a bit of darkness, I will appropriate it and use it. I suppose that, yes, they were surplus because they kept population levels in the giver. They kept them low to prevent future famines. So a twin was automatically going to be sent elsewhere, euthanized, whatever, to how they chose. The child that didn't fit in, so Gabriel, that sparks the first book, and we later find out why he didn't fit in. But yeah, he's going against the system because you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're crying, you're not being sedated the way the others are. So he's not, again, surplus to requirements. Handmaid's Tale, you saw the children, I mean, horrifically, they referred to them as shredders. So they were somehow flawed and were not kept. And again, she slips that in very quickly near the end, that one of the babies that we thought was being very embraced and celebrated and appropriated didn't quite conform. So there's a rumor that maybe it was chosen to be rejected. I think the first chapter with the illegitimacy, the cheerful first chapter that talked about illegitimacy and children being exposed and abandoned or seen as changelings, left out, they're fairies. Again, in a way, I suppose surplus to requirements or not fitting with, the product was not acceptable. We didn't quite fit with what was wanted of us. So you could have been imperfect because you were born out of wedlock or maybe through some disability or something. So yeah, it does put it up a bit to the adoptees will get it. I think. So I was thinking, who am I writing for? As I'm writing this, a couple of people said, who's your audience? I said, I would imagine it'll be angry adoptees. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping it'll be that, or people that have to live with us that want to try and understand us. But I'm thinking you nearly need to be blunt for the muggles or the kept person to sort of go, oh, okay, I get it now, that you are facing that stigma and it has roots that go back a long way. And it can sometimes be just that little bit subtle where you're maybe left out of something either by your birth family, your adopted family, or maybe by friends. If you don't get, maybe you don't get the invite to go to the pub that evening. Most people won't mind. An adoptee might go, what have I done? What's wrong with me? Abandonment again, and it just could be that you got left off the email, and you'll maybe get a call later. But you did the little things that sort of are always there, always haunting us. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't like that. To be surplus is it's a loaded word, isn't it?
It
bonus.
is,
We're bonus people. Bonus people. That's a better way of putting it.
Bonus extra.
I'm a bonus person.
It is, but I was thinking and this is something you address too, right? We've got orphans, adoptee, foundling, and sometimes we're labeled with an incorrect word, right? Like, I'm not an orphan. I had living parents. I'm not a foundling. Like, I was born at a hospital and relinquished. I have friends who are literal foundlings found in a field, by a mentally ill mother who didn't have supports she needed. So yikes. The terminology is so problematic. And you do point that out throughout the book. So I love having this extra word, surplus. And substitute family.
Yes.
Because I love it when people say, I truly love this when people say, well, I was adopted by strangers.
Yeah.
Because that's not everybody's circumstances. Sometimes we have kinship adoption, but that is what happened to me and to you. Stranger adoption. So can you talk about substitute family?
Ooh, I think we're probably, when we're always scared of being seen as ungrateful because we're meant to be grateful, because we probably get reminded quite often, oh, but you had I've had that said to me a few times, but you had good parents. And I'm thinking, I wasn't complaining. I maybe just made some comment like, I've been to Canada to see, why did you go there? You had good parents here. I think, well, they're no longer living. So it's hard to visit them. So I will maybe go and visit the living in Canada instead. But yeah, it's the terminology like substitute, it does sometimes sound very blunt and a little bit shocking. Stranger adoption. It sounds like you're rejecting strangers that brought you in, and you might not be doing that, but you're stating a fact in that, and I will always say we're mammals. We have other ways of sensing if we're in the right place, and that might not be. It may be a bit unfair because I'm sure quite often the substitute family, the stranger, can be very welcoming. Stranger's just a friend you haven't met yet. But when it comes to, baby and family, yes, it's a dark term. And if it upsets someone, I'm not going to apologize. I can't apologize to the kept person who says, oh, you're critiquing the whole system. Yeah, I'm afraid I am, because there needs to be something. What does it say about a society if mothers can't keep their babies? That lack of support, it is an indictment of society and back in, of the church that thought this was a good idea to create this industry. I know we're living in changed times and different times, but I think it's one of the worst and darkest things that can happen to a human being, that can happen to a baby, that can happen to a relinquishing mother. So yeah, I'm sorry that I can't have, sort of the flowers and rainbows. My daughter told me, the youngest girl told me, the one that keeps marching me off to hairdressers and telling me I'm awful, because she means well, tough love from her. She had there was an office party a few months back, and she said that she saw cake and she thought, oh, I wonder what they're celebrating. And one of the ladies in the office had been cleared to be an adoptive parent. Didn't know what kind of baby she was getting, didn't know the age, was told it would be an older child, was told there would be problems, but wasn't told which types of problems, and so on. So they had Prosecco and champagne, and there was balloons, and everybody was really festive and cheerful. And my daughter says, well, she says, I couldn't do it. She says, because I thought, this is lovely, this is nice, but also there's a child out there somewhere being abused. There's a mother about to lose her child. There's something horrendous happening, especially for a 2-year-old. And there's issues, but we can't tell you the issues because it might prejudice you. But I feel quite sorry for the lady. I thought you might want to know the issues. If you went to get a rescue dog, they'd warn you he bites, or he's gassy, or he's smelly, or any of the things that you might want that information on. But they thought, and I thought, that's mad that that's still happening. And I thought, that I wondered, were there any adoptees in the room that were maybe going to go and share in the cake? Maybe. But she says, I didn't eat any cake. I says, okay, but you're always on a diet anyway, because you're terribly thin. So I knew you wouldn't have eaten cake. But she says, no, did you say to anyone? Oh God, no. She says, I didn't want to be the bad fairy. I didn't want to ruin the vibe. She says, but I had to come home and tell you that, I felt a bit. So that maybe sums up society. There's still that thing of you can't speak out and you have to be like, yay, this is great. Somebody somewhere eating the cake must in the back of their mind have thought, is there not a bit of darkness under here? And are celebrations appropriate? And she was celebrating the idea that she was getting a child. And I do feel for the lady that was, just infertile, and I can see why she was overjoyed. But equally, I'm sort of thinking she might have needed to have a bit of warning that, especially an older child, that's not a baby. You're getting an older child that's been through a lot of abuse. Yeah, it's very complex. And how does law fix that? It can't. How does society fix it? I don't know. Grumpy people like me yelling at them might be the.
Me too. I'm yelling too. Alice, I am. I'm doing my best. I still have this. I cannot reconcile how people celebrate the initial adoption and we also get full coverage for every adoption reunion that people want to make public. And it's this happy, amazing story that people cry tears over. I do not know how the public reconciles that in their brain. Like, why are you celebrating? You were celebrating when they were separated. Why are you celebrating that they're back together? I don't understand.
That is a brilliant an article in that summer. That's a brilliant point. Yeah, it's like, make up your mind. Why do they have to be? Yeah, it's all so beautiful. But let's just go live. Let's do what the giver does. So everybody gets to be adopted. Everyone gets to have all that joy, and then we're all we could. There's an answer. It's a strange one. I think with most human beings, we try to make the best of things, but I think sometimes ignoring underpinning realities, they're going to bubble out later on.
Yeah.
I think we're very good at masking and saying everything is awesome, everything's wonderful. But yeah, sometimes then he said, "Oh, I wonder why was she angry today?" Don't know. Something has maybe triggered. The little triggers are everywhere. If they could stop with the triggers, if they could stop with, stop triggering us, do you have to have it as if I get one more subplot or one more twist, the big reveal is, well, guess what? I'm not your father, or I am your father, or I might be, whatever whatever that reveal is. They need to find something else to entertain people with. Well, that's very cynical, but yeah, it's becoming it's a little bit tired. It's doing us a disservice because it ties in with the whole thing of, but you're fine now and you should be grateful. And why are you not great? Twitter is a scary place to go to. Some people will get really violently angry at any adoptee who dares to not even criticize, but to just sort of say, the system could be better. Whoa, you will open, the portal to hell and people will start abusing you. I wonder why. I don't know. I don't know what the issue is, but yeah.
They have a secret child somewhere that they're afraid is going to show up on their doorstep.
Must be something like that. Yeah.
There's something. I don't know. I have one more last topic I want to talk about before we do recommended resources. And when you presented at the ASAP conference, your topic was forced adoption as a war crime.
A cheerful one. I do like a cheerful, a happy little topic.
I loved it.
Oh, did you? I spread joy.
Absolutely. I did. I totally loved it. So I feel like there's some tie-ins from the book, some examples that are similar. But can you talk a little bit about that? Because I really do think it's on theme with the rest of our conversation.
Yeah, I can do that. So casting my mind back to the paper, I think I was looking at Ukraine and sort of what is happening there, and the occupied regions where the Russian Federation has come in. Now they've decided that this is a war crime, the forcible displacement. So children are being, and older children as well, are being fast tracked and sent off to being adopted by Russian families. In some cases, going up into faraway places. It was the fast tracking of the passport that got me. So they're changing their nationality very, very quickly. They're saying that these children are, in some cases, they're saying, well, they're abandoned. So they were in care. Again, we see the falsifying, and that a lot of them weren't abandoned. Their families tried to get them back. So they're orphanizing them. They're saying, oh yeah, no parents that we could find. We know that's not true. They're using international law as a bit of a double-edged thing. So they're saying, we're not war criminals. We had to do this to stop them being stateless, because to be stateless is in breach of international law. It's a terrible thing. They're using child protection principles with saying it's in their best interests. You don't want them to stay in an institution, so we're going to send them off to this loving family. But how do you square all of that? And I know it's a very different situation to ourselves, because we were peacetime adoptees. We weren't fighting a war, but you can connect the dots. How many similar issues were there? So, there's Reuters and Amnesty, I think, did reports of these adoptees. They weren't allowed to wear the colors of Ukraine. So they weren't allowed to wear the blue and yellow. And they were taught certain songs, so that it was propaganda. And some of them, as they got a little bit older, were saying, oh yeah, that was our former country was bad. Do we see a similar thing like that happening with us? As in, how many of us didn't talk about birth family in front of adoptive family? How many of us, I never said that I got my non-identifying information. I never would have said that I was going to search. I waited till my folks were, well, I didn't wait till they were dead. I did it and didn't tell them. But in some ways, I was glad reunion happened after they passed away, because they would have lost their minds. Oh my God, it was the taboo subject of don't mention it. My mom once, she said, I think I was a teenager, and she said one time, I want you to know you're free to search anytime you want, but wait till I'm dead. She had a very pragmatic, way of looking at things. So I just think there's maybe, I don't know if the war crime will ever be prosecuted. We'll wait and see if that's ever a thing. But it will be interesting to draw maybe some lessons from wartime adoption across to the peacetime adoptees, because we're fighting our own little little battle. It's just a small personal wars against society and against, anyone that annoy. I'm ready to overturn cars now. I will start the revolution. Get out there.
Well, some of the notes I took were you said, are there some war crimes that are acceptable? And it feels like this is one of them.
Yes.
Yeah. See, good. Look at you. You're like, yeah, past Alice. Good job.
We're really listening to this talk. That's a bit. I'm not used to.
Come on.
Oh, wow. I'm not used to people listening. My students tend to doze off. They get very bored by me, so that's great. That's lovely that you took.
I took plenty of notes.
Lots of notes.
It was really evocative for me. And so was your book. And I really hope that folks follow more of your work. I know you've published many articles around this topic, and your new book, The Genetic Stigma in Law and Literature, Orphanhood, Adoption, and the Right to Reunion. I think a lot of adoptees who, like me, have read so many adoptee stories will really find it engaging. And I love how you bring the law into it, even for someone like me that is not really trained in it or anything like that. Like, I found so many things. I was like, oh, I want to learn more about this. I want to talk more about this. And so I know folks will really connect to a lot of those points that you're bringing forward. I think it's wonderful. I know you've written so many things on the topic. And so for folks that are new to you, I think they'll be excited to deep dive more of your work. For podcast listeners, though, I do want to say you have 3 episodes on the Law Pod podcast, which is that part of your university?
It is, yeah. The Queen's, the law school do that. They put out weekly on various different topics, very good explainers, law, politics. This one was slightly different, I suppose, because it was, I had Korean adoptees over, I had Canadians. So we just got us in a round table to talk about everything. So,
well, I love this. Avoiding origin deprivation. So
yes.
We'll link to those and your conversation with Emily Hipshin as well, who also oversees ASAC.
She's very good. She's very patient with me. She puts up with my bad writing. She's a great editor, and it's very good.
Anyway, we'll link to those things. I hope that folks check out all of those things, and the other work that you've written. Is Forced Adoptions as War Crimes, is that going to come out in ASAC?
Oh, yes, I think so. It's gone.
Okay.
That's, I think, at the peer review stage.
Okay.
So I think it'll probably come back to be revised a little bit, but I'm hoping it might be winter or maybe spring. So yeah, I think it ties in. You've reminded me. I think it ties in with The Giver and The Handmaid's Tale, with the lack of reunion, and also again, it's those novels. They sort of shy away from really exploring too much of adoption. So maybe that's where are some things too specific even for the dystopian novel.
Yes.
I thought, yeah, it was reunion. They don't go there. It's like, yay, happy ending, reunion, end of book. I'm like, that was, oh my God, how did they get on? You've given us this one.
Did they get a message every day with a recipe and the weather? I don't think so.
Absolutely. That's what you need. That's the reunion handbook, So, I'm a very bad cook.
I keep saying ASAC. I should say it's the Alliance for the Study of Adoption Culture. And it's a journal that comes out twice a year. And there's a conference that's biennial. So maybe you'll present in a future conference people could see. What do you want to recommend to us today?
I'll give my favorite novel, which I only really touch on it sort of briefly in the book. Again, I think a book I read when I was about 10, An Episode of Sparrows. Now, it's not strictly to do with adoption, but I like it because it follows the experience. Well, to me, it marks a sea change. So it's set in the 1950s, just after the war. And it follows the experiences of a little girl who is very slowly and gradually abandoned by her mother. And she's focused on wanting to plant a little garden among bomb ruins, like these ruined streets in London. But it actually has moments of humor. She sort of builds up her own, I guess, substitute family. She builds up kinships with people. And it's not a very long story. And it's got, I will tell you nothing of the ending because it would be a spoiler. Gardeners will like it because She's like, she gathers, and she's quite a cheeky wee girl. Like she'll occasionally, she'll occasionally shoplift to get things that she needs, and I can't recommend it enough. And there's just a tiny, tiny bit of law near the end. But again, I couldn't tell you too much about it because it would spoil the ending. But it's just great. And I've read it a few times over the years because, yourself, you read something as a child, you read it as an adult, and we get a glimpse very briefly inside of, I guess, a convent, a home of mercy or whatever. But she's so defiant the whole way through. Her defiance is very, very funny. And for once, it's actually, I know it really sounds really bleak, but, by the end of it, you're edified. You'll be doing messy crying, you'll be doing hot mess crying, but the tears won't all be sad tears. It'll be okay. But it'll ring you out on the way. So yeah, it's just if you're bored of life, or if you want to upset yourself, for the week, you'd probably read it in a day.
And there's no plot twist that there's an adoptee that's a murderer. So we're
thankfully,
good.
No, maybe that's what it needs. No, thankfully, there's none of that carry on, because that, yes, I'm one elf away from losing it. It's.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. You and Emily talk about Elf in your episode, so people can hear your Christmas movie thoughts there. This has been just a privilege. Thank you so, so much. Where can folks connect with you online and find more of your work?
Thank you so much, for starters. And I'll have to say thank you for having me. This has been brilliant. I was very scared, but you were nice to me, so okay. Well, let me think. Well, I think I'm on Twitter. I don't post much on Instagram. I just, I will have a look sort of on it. Obviously through the university's website, I have a page. Facebook from time to time, I will go on as well. I probably just mainly post pictures of the cat because he's a bit of a lunatic, and he merits. He's currently fighting with a magpie. He's having war with magpies at the minute in England. So yeah, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm open to all. Open to anybody, or anybody wants to email. You can give out, the email as well. I'm happy for conversations. If anybody wants a chat or to complain at me, I'm good for that too. Or to ask about the book or anything at all, really. No, it's everyone all welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. And it was really good to meet you properly and to have a chat with you. It was lovely.
Isn't she remarkable? I mean, just so impressive. And to add to that, if the high cost of an academically published book is a barrier for you, please know that Dr. Diver has offered to make a PDF of her book accessible if you like to email her. And all that info will be in the show notes for this episode, which will be on adopteeson.com. Or if you're listening in a podcast app, you should be able to just click on the picture and click through. The show notes should appear, and there'll be links there for you. Thank you so much for your ongoing support of the show. I would love it if you would share this episode with just one friend. Perhaps there's a fellow adoptee that you know that would really benefit from hearing from Alice's work. I am so thankful for my monthly supporters. And another way you can support the show is with just like a one-time donation through PayPal. And there's a link on the front page of adopteeson.com. If you'd like to support Adoptees On or our new project, we would love to have you, back the work we're doing and help us keep the lights on and paying all of our fellow adoptees for their work here. Thank you so much for listening. And as promised, we are going to talk again very soon this summer. Oh, you can hear my dog. Spencer cannot be chill today while I'm trying to record this for you. Sorry. He's digging on my carpet. We are going to have shows throughout the summer, and there'll be 2 episodes in July and 2 in August. And our first July episode will be coming up for you on July 12th, 2024. Thanks for listening. Let's talk again very soon.